Hello, and here we are in our third episode of So You Want to Be an Entrepreneur, Son. Today we're going to talk about value. What is value? What do you think is value, Ricky?
Well, I'd say that value is more or less a number, whether it's money, time, something like that, which is assigned to a task or a product. So, for example, you got doing dishes, and then a value for it could be, 20 minutes of time, or someone could pay you $5, something like that.
Something that most entrepreneurs need to know is that there cannot be any value without a real human being involved in the process. That means everything we do is for humans, right? It's technically speaking by humans, for humans. But if there are no humans, there's no value to create. Yes?
Yeah.
And in the context of a business, that is, of course. So that means that whenever you're trying to think about a business idea, you need to think, who are the humans? Who is the real human that I am helping, one way or the other? Okay? As we said previously, to create value is to create an opportunity or to solve a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so those two things have to happen to a real human. So that's the number one thing that you need to think to yourself as an entrepreneur. There cannot be any value without any humans. And so in any part of your business or your cycle or whatever it is that you're doing as an entrepreneur, it's never wrong to ask yourself the question, who is this helping or who is this creating an opportunity for? Now, let's dive into some examples. We talked about solving a problem or creating an opportunity. So let's say somebody that cannot walk, that is a problem. They have a problem.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about the solution. Let's just list problems. Okay? Value is solving a problem to a real human. So value can be finding a solution to someone that cannot walk, to someone that cannot see, to someone that struggles to be able to do certain things that everybody else can do. It can be as simple as making something less time consuming. Time is valuable to people. As a matter of fact, time is the only universal currency that we have. If you think about it, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Ultimately, we all have the same amount of time. Time is the only universally accepted currency. Every single one of us has a limited amount of time. And you cannot say that if you have money, you have more time. And if you don't have money, you don't have more time. We all have the 24 hours in a day, and we all live about 70 to 90 years. And yes, there are some people that have money and try to extend their lifetime, but it doesn't matter. Ultimately, the difference is small, which means time is the same currency for everybody. Generally speaking, because time is a universal currency, very often you can create a relationship between time and value. Let me give you an example. If it takes me 10 hours to do something, and then it can take me 5 hours to do that something, that gives me 5 more hours. That is a currency that is universal. It doesn't matter where you live in the world. Something taking you 5 hours instead of 10 hours is universally valuable. And to some degree, it has a similar amount of value. People subjectively understand the importance of their time differently, but the value of time is the same to all of them. So that means that as you mature, as you grow, as you evolve, what you start to realize is you start to better understand and seek more clearly the value of time. But it's not like before you saw it, it was less valuable. You perceived it to be less valuable. And so this brings us to an interesting part, which is value sometimes needs to be taught. Some people don't know that something can be valuable to them until you show them. How can you show someone that something is valuable?
Well, maybe with, smaller kids and money. At first, if you give them a piece of paper, they won't be happy. They definitely prefer candy or Play-Doh or some toys instead of a bill. Then later on, obviously, as they grow up, they're going to find out, hey, I could buy more things with this. So by teaching them and showing them that if I give you this, you can use this to give it to others, and they give you things in return, they learn that it has social value.
Social value, that is a really big one. As an entrepreneur, you will often be in a position where you will showcase the value you're creating, so a solution to a problem or creating an opportunity, and people will not see any value in it. Should you stop?
You just teach them the value.
Okay, how would you teach them the value? Let's take an example. You will go to someone and you say, I have a solution that will allow you to do what you do right now every day and takes 5 hours, and it will make it take 1 hour instead. Okay, and let's imagine that they tell you, yeah, but why Should I be interested in it taking me less time? I have my job. I don't want to have to do more stuff. How would you address that objection?
As in if I'm talking to him.
Imagine that you've created an app or a solution to someone and you're going and talking to the person that is going to be using the solution. You're going to have that conversation with them. You're going to tell them, thanks to this solution, something that takes you 5 hours is going to take you an hour instead. And they tell you, why would I want it to take an hour? I have my job. I have my things. Like, I want stability in my job. I don't want to have to change things and all that kind of stuff. How would you address that objection?
It's a good question. It's also a fair point. I can't imagine anyone turning that down. Why would you?
You can't imagine anyone turning that down. And that's interesting. The reason you can't imagine anybody turning that down is because you have learned to understand the value of time. And so this brings us to a point of like, you shouldn't be taking things at a surface level. You should understand. And for instance, in this case, what I would do is I would say, okay, well, it seems to me that you're not particularly passionate about your job. You're struggling with it. And this is a difficult conversation. I mean, look, you're just presenting your solution to that. Why the hell should you bother to try to go into, their psychological health? It's like, this person hates their job. I should just give up and move on to the next person. And sometimes you should, but in the context of what I'm trying to say here of people need to be educated about value. They need to learn about it. The first thing to be able to educate someone is understanding them, is compassion. At school, for instance, have you ever had different experiences with different teachers? Some of them you felt you could relate to, they cared about you.
Yeah.
And some of them just didn't give a shit about you.
Yeah.
Can you think of some examples?
Surprisingly, there was a physics teacher that I had, and he was more down to earth. Maybe I could say that, because instead of teaching us, he'd, well, as you said, get into our minds and try and find a way that's easier to explain to us within our own terms. Since obviously generations have different ways they speak, with different vocabulary and different words. So for example, my generation uses more slang, and my physics teacher's generation would use a bunch of fancy words, which half my class can understand. So he simplify, explain it in our terms, show us examples that we've seen in the past, instead of ones that we'd only seen in like a laboratory or something. And then there was people like, I don't know, like my chemistry teacher. Unfortunately, we didn't have access to a laboratory, so we couldn't do a lot of the things that we wanted to. So we had to learn based off presentations, slideshows, and you could see that she wasn't really passionate about it. She didn't care. She was like, okay, 8-hour day, let's get over with it.
So here we go. That's an excellent example, right? For you to be able to create value to people, it's also you having the patience to understand what's beyond the surface. And if anything, in this conversation we were referring to before, you could get more out of learning, well, okay, let's assume that this is a solution in an e-commerce world, okay? It's a company that does e-commerce, and you're talking to someone who is now spending 5 hours, and you have a solution that is going to make him spend 1 hour. And his answer is like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't want to go be bothered with this. I'm comfortable. I have my routine and all that kind of stuff. And then you trying to understand and taking a human approach. That's the thing. There cannot be any value without humans. And saying, well, I understand that. And let's put aside my solution. Let's put my solution aside. Let's pretend it's just you and I having a beer and then talking about your job, your work. Why is it that you don't think it's valuable for you to do something in 1 hour instead of 5? And then you might get into the point where they're going to tell you it's a cultural thing. They're not motivated. It's easy to say, well, okay, I spoke to the wrong person and they're just not motivated. But what is lack of motivation?
I'd say it's a lack of willpower.
It can be a lack of willpower, but how would you classify in the context of our conversation when we're talking about value? Lack of motivation.
Being scared of change in this context?
Sure, but is it a missed opportunity or is it a problem?
Well, it's a missed opportunity, since I'd say they don't have a problem, since they said that now.
Well, I mean, it is a problem. They're not motivated. But you're right, it can also be lack of opportunity. But you see where I'm getting to? All of a sudden, you went into this conversation thinking, I need to tell this person that the solution to their problem is that they need to save time. Whereas another problem they have is that they're not motivated. And so what you've learned from it is you've learned, well, it seems like, and in this case, it's one conversation, but if you have it with enough people, you might come to the realization of saying, well, okay, they do have a problem that they spend 5 hours doing something that it could take an hour doing it. But the reason they haven't changed that is because they're not motivated. And so there is a bigger problem to be solved. Yes?
Yeah.
Like, of course, there might be scenarios in which you're not going to have that conversation. But I think what I wanted to show you with this example was we talked about openness. And without openness, you're not going to be able to truly understand the real value that people need. That was an example of being faced with an objection and someone not understanding the importance of the value you're trying to create. And now in some cases, you might just simply have a resistance, and the answer might be that there is a bigger problem that needs to be solved. And now maybe you're going to decide that you're going to try to solve that bigger problem, or you're going to decide, well, the reason this isn't out there is that because there's a bigger problem stopping it. In other cases, education is important because the employee might lack understanding of what it means to them to save time. So let's go back to that example. It's an e-commerce business and you're talking to someone and trying to give them a solution where the value you're creating for them is to get them to do something that takes an hour instead of 5. And then they tell you, well, why would I want to do that? And then you can educate them in a way that it's like, well, your business right now could be doing 3 times as much revenue. With 3 times as much revenue, there is an opportunity that your business becoming more successful can bring more stability to you. And people don't necessarily correlate those things. My business making more money, my business being more successful, or the business I work in, because we're talking about an employee here. The business I work in being more successful impacts me directly in what way? Helping them navigate this process and guiding them through the journey that it requires for them to come to the understanding of truly what that means is an example of value sometimes needs to be taught or educated. And without openness, it's going to be very hard to do that. And therefore, like we said, there can be no value without humans, and there's not much convincing humans if you cannot understand them and be open to listening to them. Let's now kind of dive a little bit more into creating an opportunity. So previously we said value needs to be educated, but it's not, you don't only need to educate a problem, a solution to a problem, or help people understand that this is a problem. Sometimes it's even harder to tell people that they could be doing things in a whole different way that they didn't even know was possible. Or let's take ChatGPT as an option right now. I think one of the reasons that it's taking longer than one would have thought. Some people told me like, that's it, in 3 months, everybody's going to be using ChatGPT all day long, all the time. And potentially it might, and I'm not here to say that it's taking longer than it should, but ChatGPT could be growing slower than its potential, because most of what ChatGPT is able to do now is it's creating an opportunity. The value it's giving people is in the form of a new opportunity. But the issue is people don't know about what could they possibly do. To be able to change and to be able to take advantage of an opportunity requires you to have creativity to be like, well, let me see if I could do this in a different approach. To go to the example we spoke about before with Ford, right? It's like, well, now we have a car. We used to have horses. Now we have a car. And people were like, what is a car? What the hell are you talking about? It's a piece of metal. Is it going to be safe? Like what? You have resistance. You have a lot of resistance when it comes to innovative value creation in the form of creating a new opportunity. Let's make a simulation and try to imagine yourself being Ford and going to people and trying to tell them there is a car now and that people should get cars. So imagine I'm someone, we can do a little role play here, okay? I'm someone who's always gone on horses, and you've invented the car. And you have to come to me and convince me that I should get a car.
We're talking about old model cars, completely old?
A car, yeah. Remember, I'm someone that was on horses, and they've never seen a car in my life. Most people haven't. It's not common knowledge what a car is. So sell me a car.
Okay, well, I understand you use horses a lot, so I'm assuming that you do have at least more than one. So you'd say that you have a stable, right? Of a couple.
Yeah, I have a couple of horses.
How much does it cost you to keep those horses in the stable all day long and feed them and clean up after them? Would you say it's a bit annoying?
Yeah, it's a bit time consuming. That's true. It does cost me. I need to, do a lot of work to make sure that they're doing well. I mean, I love them, and they're animals. I love them, but yes, it's quite time consuming. I need to actually have a full-time person that works at the stables to make sure that they're taken care of and that they're healthy and that I'm able to, whenever I need to go somewhere, quickly get on my horse and go.
Yeah. So another thing would be that if your horse is sleeping during the day, maybe, and you want to take him, he's sleeping. So if you wake him up just now, he's going to be slower, he's going to be tired, he's not going to get you places, he's going to be lazy, because he's a horse. He's also a living being. So he has living being emotions.
True. That is true, yes.
Now, what if I told you you could have the equivalent of a horse, but it's faster, doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, doesn't poop, keeps you safe, and can go on harder roads and more difficult roads? Would you say that'd be a preferable option compared to a horse?
Yeah.
Right, well, I've got something. I've called it a car. It's got 4 wheels and it's powered by an engine, meaning that there's constant movements, completely not powered by life. So it can run practically all the time. without sleeping, without taking a break or anything. All you need is gas. Gas is the only cost.
What is gas?
Well, imagine the oil that you use for cooking,
Okay.
right? We could compare it to carrots or some other snacks for your horse. It's fuel. You know how you feed your horse while it's going. If it's doing long trips, you're going to have to feed it. It's going to get tired. It's going to get hungry. So similar to that, a car needs something to run on. The engine needs fuel, food. Exactly.
Okay, cool.
So oil is the equivalent of food for the engine.
Okay, cool. So it's basically a horse faster than a horse that doesn't need to sleep. I can go whenever I want and it can go faster.
Yeah.
Well, sounds great. I'm sold. Great job, Ricky. Like, that is a fantastic way of approaching understanding a problem and specifically selling it. It seems like you're going to be a great sales guy. What you did there was you truly tried to relate to me, to the real story. You see, we're talking to a real human being, like very often people that are trying to sell something or they're just going in the solution. And you're like, okay, well, let me understand. Like, is your horse sleeping? Is it doing this? You try to understand the human behind the value that you're trying to create. And that is going to be key to get you to run a successful business or in general, like create value in your life. You don't need to be an entrepreneur to create value. In any context that you're going to be in, whether you're an employee or whether you're an entrepreneur, wherever your journey takes, there are certain questions that are never wrong to ask, literally. And you cannot ask it enough. And if people tell you, oh, you're asking this question all the time and it's repetitive, say, well, it's an important question. I need to understand it. At my company, I have a thing I tell people. I say, don't do something unless you understand why it's needed. And usually why will quickly lead you down the path of trying to ask the question, who is this helping to? Who is this creating value to? Great. I think that's it. That was a fantastic one. And let's see the next episode, what it is that we'll be discovering.
Sounds good.
See you next time.